It's always the case. It's not quorum enough, I guess. At least 4, right? Yep. Got 4. Nat, are you coming Friday? Of course. Of course. Good.
I haven't missed it ever. I'm ready.
A lot of good stuff. Today, actually, we just got from Bahi, right on. Is that near? We just.
We're good.
The origin.
Yes.
Oh, there, please. Okay. You're not quorum. Okay. Quorum, I guess. Yep.
Okay, we've got a quorum, so let's call this meeting to order. We'll start with the roll call. Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Norton.
Present.
Commissioner Fox.
Present.
Commissioner Rundeck. Commissioner Wallen.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
And Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Thank you. We will start with the land acknowledgement statement. The Flagstaff Open Space Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home. For the March meeting minutes to approve as, do I have a motion to submit the meetings as published?
So moved.
Second,
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries to accept the minutes as published. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject that is not scheduled before the commission on this day. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on any item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask the staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. Is there anybody here wishing to address the commission on a matter that is not currently on the agenda? Yes, sir.
Hi, Charlie Silver. If there's text-based stuff up there, not a presentation, not a slide, I wonder if we could just magnify that a few clicks so we can read the screen, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Is that something we can do? How's that work for you? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business before the commission that's not currently on the agenda? Great. So first item on the agenda for this evening is the Hidden Hollow easement adjustment recommendation to the Flagstaff City Council. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to make a statement about this particular topic?
Hello, I'm Alexa Stack, owner of the TJ parcel. Please forgive my frustration as I speak tonight. It's just that the behavior exhibited here over the last few months has seemed somewhat disorganized, somewhat ill-prepared, and every meeting has felt like we were starting over and repeating the same questions and concerns, and not acknowledging or retaining the information that has been presented over the last few months. What is happening here is very wrong and has been wasteful of both your time and ours. Over the course of the last several months, I have heard repeatedly from the city's attorney presenting you the information, and even several of the commissioners, that we have a legal right here. This easement already existed. It predates the conservation easement, and we are asking for it to be amended to be both soundly engineered to meet city of Flagstaff requirements, while also reducing the amount of disturbance to open space. I have heard the commissioners speak about being guided by their founding documents, but it doesn't seem like the time has been taken to actually look at them and understand them. The original deed for the growing property states on the very first page, quote, subject to existing reservations, easements, or rights of way, heretofore legally obtained and now in full force and effect, end quote. And then again on the fourth page, it speaks on the conservation piece. The patentee shall allow reasonable permanent access to private lands pursuant to ARS 37-312.01, which states, quote, notwithstanding any other provision of this article, the reclassification of trust lands as suitable for conservation purposes shall not restrict or unreasonably limit access to use or enjoyment of private lands. Any lease or sale of land pursuant to this article shall include a condition requiring that permanent access to and use and enjoyment of private land be allowed, end quote. I've also heard concerns of the driveway eating into the open spaces allowable 20 acres of development. Firstly, if it does, this amendment actually gives acreage back to the open space compared to the original easement agreement. And secondly, as has become the popular tagline through this process, buyer beware. When you purchase properties, they sometimes have encumbrances on them that you have to navigate and account for. You all are tasked with a very huge responsibility in being stewards of the open space, and I can appreciate that. But we are bordering on becoming reckless and irresponsible with the emotions attached to that and completely ignoring legal rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the commission on the Hidden Hollow issue? Sir.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all, Cody Ratson, one of the press owners too, Al, I think. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I think there's maybe a misunderstanding on what the commission is voting on. As Alexis just pointed out, we have an easement that goes to our property. We have a legal right to put a road on that easement. That easement doesn't align with the existing disturbance. And so what we're voting on is, do we want to make our road as close as possible to the existing easement? There's some subtle modifications that need to be met for city standards. But do we want to blade a new road that's 20 feet away, 60 feet away, 100 feet away from an existing road? Or can we put our new driveway where the existing disturbance is? So that's what we're here. That's what we're asking. And so a no vote is you want us to try to make a new road next to an existing disturbance. I don't have enough information vote is you want us to do our best to line up with our existing legal access. So what we're asking the commission is, can we make a new road? Not make a new road, can we make our driveway in line with the existing disturbance and minimize our impact? So that's why we're here, and I feel like there's been some confusion of issues. We're not here asking about what's happening in county. We're not here asking what we can do with our property. We're here asking, can we move our driveway from the legal description to where the existing road is? That's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to make a public comment? Okay, so for the rest of us, members of the commission, I think our goal this evening on this particular meeting is to come to a recommendation that we can offer to city council. As has been stated, we've been talking about this issue for quite some time. I think we've collected more than enough data. And I think it's incumbent upon us, not only in service to our constituents, but to all the decision makers to make that recommendation this evening. And I do want to acknowledge that our job is just that, making a recommendation. City council obviously can accept that all or in part, can choose to reject it, or can make some decision that has nothing to do with the recommendation that we make them. So we're simply in the role of making a recommendation, but I do want to conclude that business tonight and be able to vote or come to some kind of consensus on the different options that we've been presented that are spelled out very clearly in the minutes that we've all been provided. I do think we have the necessary data. There may be a few points out there that we don't yet know the answer to, but I think we have enough information to make that decision. So as a commission, I'm asking that we focus on trying to meet that goal tonight so that we can put this issue to rest, have the decision made, and we can move on to the other pressing business that we have as a commission. So having said that, open the floor to discussion and moving towards that decision.
I'll jump in real quickly. Oh, first of all, great summaries. Perfect. Good basis for the discussion today. My main concern was always not that the right of way was a legal right of way and that the folks had a right of way for it. But will the authorities, whether it's the city parks or the state land, say the existing right of way was a 2-track? Is it changing anything to make it into a full-fledged 20-foot wide city spec road? I think, well, I can only guess that they'll say probably doesn't make any difference. But I wanted to have that for the city council to have in their drawing saying, yeah, we're okay with that. So that was a question at the last meeting. And did we find any more? I know it's hard to communicate with the state.
Thanks for that question, Commissioner Wade. I do actually have a little bit of follow-up. So I can move to that. I have a little bit of follow-up on Arizona Game and Fish, which I can jump in there and share that first. So we did reach out to Arizona Game and Fish concerning the goshawk activity. They do not anticipate significant impacts on the goshawk activities due to the planned road improvements. However, they did point out that our data is quite old, 2016. I think it's the last survey. They did have some general recommendations. They recommended keeping the road dirt, help minimize the vehicle speed and wildlife collisions in general. I believe the road is planned as ABC, often referred to as AB. So it would be gravel or dirt road base. They also have the general recommendation, which fencing has not been discussed during this conversation, but they thought that if fencing was put up in the right-of-way easement that could prohibit wildlife movement into Reserve Mesa. And so they recommended that, we they prefer not to have fencing that could obstruct wildlife. That was really the main point of interest that Arizona Game and Fish shared with the commission. And then I did have a little bit of feedback from Arizona State Parks. We asked them, the commission's 3 different questions about, is the proposed amendment to the right of way allowable? Or put another way, does amending the right of way violate the Reserve Mesa National Area Conservation Easement baseline conditions? And if the state believes that amending the right of way easement to improve the road would not significantly impact the property's baseline conditions, would an increase in motorized traffic from the construction or future residents of the unit be an impact the baseline condition? And I don't have an answer on all of these, but to the first question, Flagstaff does have the authority to allow a right of way legal description to be changed. So that was a yes. To the second question, work done within the right of way will impact the current 10% allowance of development to the conservation easement land. And so they thought that if the work was inside the current existing easement, that it would not. If it falls outside and an amended easement, then it would. And that was the totality of that. And then the final question is, if the work is done within the existing right-of-way boundary, Parks involvement would need to monitor that construction activity did not impact the conservation resources outside of the right-of-way boundary. And if the city proposes to change the right-of-way footprint, then the Parks Board would need to approve it in addition to monitoring the construction activities. So we don't have an answer for would the change of an amendment, how would it affect the baseline documentation, the baseline, and that is still something that we're waiting for.
I was pushing that part the most. My feeling there is we've done about as much and we've allowed the city council for that one concern. And so I'll go to the next step as far as the right of way being changed a little bit one way or the other. If you're gonna have a road in there, I don't think changing the right of way one way or the other is gonna make any difference. The road is gonna be in there. And then the third thing I'd like to say is we've come up with a number of concerns we have that would be, and it sounds like the Arizona Parks will also have concerns about how the road is built, like no fences, maybe utilities underground, maybe this, maybe that. And we have a whole list of those things. So given all of that, that's put into one document, that would be that's what I would vote for, moving it on to the city council.
That is very similar to option C, I think, which is captured in our minutes, which is to approve the amendment as proposed with recommendations to minimize the impact to the open space. So can we start, maybe, is anybody opposed to the idea of option C? We can get to the details of the recommendations maybe, but is anybody here opposed to the idea of option C, which would be recommend the amendment to the right of way with conditions that we might suggest that would try to minimize the impact of that approval to the actual open space? Anybody have different thoughts or ideas about that?
I just have a thought. I just wanted to point out that, really the difference between C and D is D becomes sort of an if-then situation. If Arizona State Parks approves this with the baseline situation, then we have these conditions. So, it comes down to, I think our choice is how firmly do we want to say, yes, we approve it and with these conditions, please accept these conditions as it moves on up the ladder, or we're leaving it to, we need more information. We're going to give this back to you to make some of those decisions. Please consider our conditions. Does that weaken our, how strongly we feel about our conditions? And when we're giving it that sort of if then. That's what have been toying with and going really kind of back and forth between giving it a recommendation with conditions or making it well known that we do not feel that we had everything that we needed to fully support the change.
What if we made the recommendation with the, or what if option C was approved, we recommend approving the right of way, understanding we can't really drill down on the specifics of the conditions because there are some outstanding legal questions. But our feeling as a commission is let's maximally protect the open space to the extent that we can. And when we defer to the expertise of staff to try to implement that, because I think we'll get caught back in this indecision loop here where we're not gonna make a decision because we're waiting for data points, but we know what we want to do, which is to your point, protect it as best we can.
That's why in my point of view, I tend to agree with C with several conditions that we discussed before. And the council, we make recommendation to the council. The council could discuss it further in terms of condition and everything else.
Considering the council probably won't have this question answered either
Exactly.
until it goes above them.
Bruce,
So
I think we have the responsibility to say, this is what we believe, this is what, excuse me, we think is right, open space, and not just toss it to the state to do whatever the state, this is what I think we should, this is what we believe, this is what we support, and if someone else who has more authority overrules it, so be it.
So in terms, so how does that look then? Like, do we provide a list of recommendations and say, this is what we recommend, understanding that maybe, there's legal ramifications that would prevent X, Y, and Z, and how detailed do we go?
I like C. I would support C with these conditions. I have a little heartburn with a couple of them. But generally with that, a listing of some specifics. Is that idea that there may be some other ones, some of these may not be feasible because of legal issues, but this is what we believe, this is what we think protects the open space and protects the citizens and the folks who own that property.
Can we query the members of the public about their?
Yeah, you can clarify, you can ask our kind questions on. Your question.
Well, my main question is, have the members of the public who are here had a chance to review the conditions that were mentioned in the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Any thoughts on those conditions?
Some of them are actually expressed.
Can you come up to the podium, please?
Some of them are actually expressed in the language of the existing easement.
Correct.
Some of them are limited by current zoning and city ordinances anyway. And then some of them I feel are, and I think my cohort's getting reader slightly or completely ridiculous requests of private properties. But that is kind of the general consensus, because there are some that are like, yeah, they're expressed in the easement. There are some that are going to be limited. There are some that are ridiculous.
Can you articulate the ones that you think are ridiculous?
I believe asking us to put the restrictions on our properties, like prohibiting ADUs, any that develops our properties. And that's my biggest one.
I'm sorry,
Deed restriction?
Yeah,
Need restrictions.
thank you.
I'm at the stand. I'm Joe Hendricks. I've got the 40 acres, I know one that's never been subdivided in the state, so. If you guys want to go top to bottom, it's almost straightforward.
Sure.
I think for the most part, we agree with everything you say, Bruce. You made the comments later on. The idea is to have a minimally impactful road that crosses this open space. We agree with it. There's no intent to pave it. There's no intent to fence it. There's no intent to put retaining walls on it. And the reality is we could build the road today. And it's the reference that was made earlier about a 2-track. So it's not a 2-track. Well, what's approved and what's legal right now is a
20
feet. So it's not really changed in that regard. And you also made the comment that it becomes a city road. It's not becoming a city road, it's driveway. And it's built to a driveway standard. So it's, that legal right's already there. And the reason we're changing that, when I mean alignment, I mean the horizontal layout where it goes, is to accommodate emergency service vehicles. They mandate it can't be more than 10% grade. Right now, the existing grade out there on one spot is roughly 18 or 19 degrees, and it can be done. But it's not, EMS doesn't consider it safe, doesn't consider it accessible. And that also comes down to firefighting as well. We have most of our area thinned up there. Most of the private land has already been thinned. And certainly most of the state land has been thinned as well. But nonetheless, that is sort of the public-private interface area up there. And access to it, the safe road for fire services is helpful. I mean, you've got all that park, you've got Linwood, you've got Cheshire. We're sort of the buffer between the two. So being able to get up there with trucks is important. And that's the one road that does it, gets on top of that, makes it easiest. So I think what pretty much everybody's in agreement on that 118 acres is we want a minimally invasive driveway that goes up there. We don't want any major infrastructure along the way. We're fine with the access being just for the parcels and doesn't need to be a public road. There was a proposal that a gate be there to limit it. And we'd be okay with the gate, but only with the understanding that the city maintains that gate. I'm a contractor by training and profession, and gates up here don't work so good in the winter. And with snow load and whatnot, they stop working unless they operate in sort of an articulating hinge fashion as opposed to a sliding fashion. Slide fashions, they'll work for 5 years without being serviced. These ones require some maintenance just because of snow load and whatnot. So we would ask that the city that be part of their program and their parks and their maintenance. And obviously you're probably going to require some kind of electrical to opener. You might be able to pull it off on the solar panel. It's possible, but I'm not sure about that. But we are okay with gate. We're not okay with the deed restrictions and the limits of the split. You can't split any more than 5 acre parcels to begin with. And the bigger parcels that are up there, my understanding is maximum is a 3-way split. Kevin and I discussed this a little bit. He doesn't think we can split it all, but I tend to disagree. But that's for the planning department to work out. We don't want to restrict. You start to get into some pretty serious legal taking rights when you start limiting people's use of their land. And I don't think that's really what we need to do or should do. This is really about minimizing impact for your land, for the open space, and for the people that are going to be using that open space. And that's why we're here. And we don't want to change that. I started working on this project almost 20 years ago, working with Lori Nichols at the State Land Department. I probably know as much more about this whole piece of land up there as anybody does. And all we've ever wanted to do. I mean, when I first started this, I thought, well, it would be great to have a subdivision with 5 acre parcels. And that died very quickly on the vine, just because you can't do it without big water tanks, and you wouldn't have a hill to put the water tanks on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're okay with our legal rights right now, the way they are, which is not a whole lot. We can't split much, and it'll be septic up there. There'll be no water up there. You're gonna either have to drill a well or haul water. And the power, it's conceivable we can bring power in off Hidden Hollow Road, and if we did, we definitely want it underground. have no intention of putting overhead utilities. So, I think everything on your list is about minimum action. We're completely on board with. You just don't want to minimize our legal rights. That's all, because they're already minimized. And I think that's sort of encapsulates it. Was there something specific that you want me to chime in on? So I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Misunderstood what I was saying about the 2-track.
Sure.
I realize it's 20-foot. What's there is a 2-track.
It is, it's a Jeep track.
And,
Yeah.
and so what I'm asking the state is, the 2-track road now is gonna be a
Right.
developed road.
Right.
Is that a problem?
Well, driveway, not road. So,
Well,
yeah.
no, that's the other thing. I have property on Flag Mesa. And there's a 3/4 of a mile road that goes from the end of Lower Coconino all the way up to the top.
Okay,
It was built by the developer and everything, and it's called a public-private road. And I was wondering whether this road, which is required to meet city standards, and I know driveway is a name for it, but what is the actual access limitations to it or not?
That question's for me, right?
Yes,
The easement is for public right of way. So the current easement says public right of way. In our discussion with the property owners, before we got to the commission, one of the things we floated was the potential to make it a private driveway to limit traffic, which the property owners were amenable to. So that's how we discussed it more recently, is one of the amendments to the easement would take off the public right of way and make it a private driveway. And with access from bicycle and ped, I think is where the discussion went. So we can, that can be part of the amendment. We're not locked in, but currently right now it's public right of way. It would be if they built something under the current easement, it would be a public road.
yeah, it should be clear because the HOA of the Black Mesa group, when Lowell needed a second access, and they had to build a road exactly with the same dimensions that you're talking about. Third of a mile for $300,000, 20 feet wide, and the ABC base and all the rest of it. The HOA said, we'll let you in if this condition and that condition and that condition. And Lowell was amenable to that. However, the Lowell lawyers researched it and found that it was public-private. And so that the HOA did not have any rights of restriction for it. It's a dead end, but didn't have a right of restriction for it.
Yeah, we'd be restricting this currently.
And so that's why I bring this up. What is the easement?
The easement is public right of way. Currently, right now, it's public right of way. And we can keep it that way. The council may decide to keep it as public right of way. But the discussion was with the traffic, and property owners are agreeable to that. They understand you may not want a lot of traffic on that road. So the idea was, as part of the amendment process, make it a private driveway. So it's only accessed by those property owners. And that was proposed to protect the area.
Okay, I think that is something worth discussing about because as you point out, and I felt all along, a real benefit to this on the other side of everything else is access to the area and access by fire and so on. But eventually maybe access by folks that can't ride a bike up there or walk up there, but would like to get up there. So, you know, from Open Space Commission point of view, you know, I'm not trying to make it a bad thing or anything like that, but just looking at it from that point of view, it might be beneficial in 10 years down the stream, be able to have access up there by the public.
And I would
Limited access maybe, but access.
I would just add that if that's where the commission wants to go, I would just add it as one of the proposed conditions that it's maintained as public right of way. I just think that's not consistent with, I think, where this discussion started, but it's up to you all what you want to recommend.
Well, and this, you know, the positives and negatives to that, and I don't know whether we want to leave that to the council or just make our recommendation and let the council decide.
Yeah, I think we've got some mission creep here, right? So, I mean, I look at some of these conditions and restrictions, and I don't think it's within our scope to be telling any private property owner whether they can put an ATV on their property or any of that other stuff. And like rezoning things, I don't think that's our purview. like, I think it was best said by Cody, what our job here is to do. We're in agreement, at least, that we think we can recommend that we accept the proposed amendment to the easement. We're stuck on what conditions we would recommend, if any. I look at these, I think there's like 15 of these things. This seems like this would take another 3 meetings. We only meet once a month. That's another 3 months to get through all these things. And some of these, again, I think are mission creep. I don't think that these are our responsibility. So, I mean, I'm obviously open to discussing that, but it seems like these zoning discussions and stuff are best left to the city council and other legal folks. I don't know if we've got the expertise to weigh in on that. Our job is to focus on maintaining the nature of the open space. And I think we're trying to do that by having a minimally viable product with a max protected in the maximum way, revegetation and all the things that affect the open space. But this other stuff seems like it's out of our scope. That's just my.
Is there any other specific questions for me?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I don't have any. Anybody else in the commission?
No? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. But open to opposing viewpoints, obviously.
I just wanted to bring up that, really all of these conditions, they're all meant to preserve the open space, which is under our purview. And even the limitation of ADUs, and I would even go as far as to say no short-term rentals on those ADUs or primary properties, because the main purpose of that was to reduce traffic across the Observatory Mesa natural area. And that's where, it's not so much that we are doing rezoning or asking for zoning issues. But this is what we're saying, when you are able to amend something like this, similar to a rezone, similar to the development agreement of sorts, that you can ask for these things in cooperation. And I think that's what we're doing out of concern for the traffic and the impact to Observatory Mesa, that now, 40 years later, after that original right-of-way was written, is open space with a conservation easement. The property owners, they have access, they just don't have access to build what they want to build according to city regulations that are now current. And that's where we have tussled with this. And I think I think these conditions represent a cooperation between the original intent of honoring the property rights of these parcel owners, but also honoring what Observatory Mesa has become over those many years. So I'm in support of forwarding all of these conditions. And now, considering that there may be some verbiage that's needed to be fleshed out, whether it's here or in legal or council or whatever, with regard to how the roadway, whether it's called a roadway or a private driveway and such. But that's my feeling on it.
Well, as I mentioned, I have some heartburn with multiple of these conditions, and one way to address it perhaps is to say, okay, here are the ones we really, open space related, we really think that these are important to consider. However, the council might also want to think about these issues as it goes forward, just as a recommendation to the council. But I think we should have a list of conditions that's as minimalist as possible to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Do you have any suggestions on like which ones you would include and which ones you wouldn't?
Yep. Let's see, I would take, all bullet points instead of numbers. The gate, I get it with gates. I put in lots of roads with lots of gates, and gates are problematic at best for all kinds of reasons. But that's a technical issue. The 1, 2, 3, 4 submit an as-built certified survey. I don't think that's really within our purview.
That's just FYI, that's required under the current easement.
Okay,
It just goes to the state instead of the city.
then
That is it.
I don't think we need to repeat that then.
Yeah, you may just want to add a condition that all the conditions in the current easement remain.
Right.
And then that'll be captured
That's a good way to say it.
Do you mean the easement or the right of way?
right away, sorry.
Thank you.
The lot splits and accessory dwelling units, those are two issues that I would put in my list of council. We think you should look at these, but I think that's beyond us for open space to be requiring. And then ongoing road maintenance, that's to me very, very vague. And I don't know what that means. If someone said to me, I need to maintain this road, I could do lots of different things and say I maintain this road. So I think that needs to be either to city standards or whatever it is, but that needs more specificity. And the last one, monitoring, I think that's, I just think that's asking. And that also is, it's very long, but it's very vague in terms of what it is that we're asking. If I looked at that and I own that land, I'd look and say, yeah, so what do you want me to do? What do you want me to monitor? When do you want me to do it? Can I do it myself? Do I have to call in a consultant or an engineer? I know about stuff and I wouldn't have a clue of where to start on that one. So either we make it a lot more detailed, which I don't recommend, or we make it go away, or we reference something else that has more details.
So that's 4, I think. So on the notes, sorry, on the meeting minutes, that's G, item G, require the entry gate. That's item L, prohibit future lot splits. Item M, prohibit or limit ADUs. And item O, require monitoring. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4
And J.
total. What's that?
J, required ongoing road maintenance.
Yeah, and ongoing maintenance.
Yep.
So your recommendation is pull those out, potentially eliminate them altogether, or at least say, hey, council, for your consideration, here are some things we thought of. Don't have a recommendation either way because of either legal stuff, lack of detail or clarity on the recommendation itself, et cetera.
I'm a firm believer of road maintenance. You will hear about that a little bit later, but not as it's specified here. It's too vague.
I'm wondering if they could be like, a bullet point that's, in an effort to reduce traffic across the Observatory Mesa, considerations, might include, preventing those subdivisions and the lot splits, preventing the ADUs and such. At least it gives council the idea, perhaps you can look at these conditions and legal choices. It's not in our purview to say that these are things that you should instill, but these are things that we thought of as traffic calming, traffic reducing measures.
Yeah, so I think this was my original point, was we could include these conditions as for your consideration. And the council could they could choose to take our input or not take our input, however the case may be. Then everybody's heard, it goes to council, but they're the deciders ultimately. I do worry about setting the precedent for making recommendations that, in my opinion, are clearly outside our purview. To your point, I agree with you on, I would prefer to eliminate these 4 or these 5 from the recommendations and then include the others as for your consideration. That would be what I'm comfortable with. Option C, get rid of these 4 or 5 things that I think are outside our purview and submit it like that.
Can we get a little clarification on the 5 that you,
Yeah, I'm throwing around a lot of numbers here.
no, you're okay.
I should probably count it.
I got G, the required entry to be gated, so, I think that this particular one does have to do whether or not it's maintained in the public right of way, or if you want to reduce the traffic shift information just to be pedestrian traffic, like walkers and bicycles. So I think that is where this original condition came from.
G. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, I got it.
Yep, G, J,
require ongoing road maintenance.
My bad.
yeah,
So that, all of this is gonna be put in the revised easement if we get there, and I'll be the one drafting it. I would provide all the specificity you're talking about. I think the idea here, and this has not been an issue with the property owners at all. That the property owners understand that that's reason why we're requiring the creation of the HOA, so we have someone to contract with essentially. That the property owners have been agreeable to maintaining the road. The idea is the city's not gonna be out there maintaining, we're not gonna be responsible for it. It's gonna be all of the property owners who have access through this easement to be responsible for snow clearing, for annual maintenance, any erosion issues. I think, and you can get some head nods or some shaking of the heads over there. You got head nods. They understand this, and that'll all be in the revised rules.
But if we do go right away, that could change.
Thank you, and he's correct. If it's a public road, the city's gonna have all the maintenance. I don't think that's where we're gonna go, but if we ended up going there, yes, the city would maintain the road because it's gonna be a public roadway.
Our HOA has to maintain our road, yet we can't limit public from going up it. And it was
Well,
called,
that may be the agreement you have.
it was
let
called
me back up.
public.
Council can try to do that. My recommendation would be if it's public roadway, the city needs to maintain it. That would be my recommendation to the council, because I think that's pretty unfair to say, we're gonna open this thing up and it's going to be, we're gonna ask people to come now go to Preliminary Mesa and access it, so how you can do all these things. And then all the maintenance ends up on the 7 property owners.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm not going one way or the other. I just like, maybe even for my own information, which is kind of selfish to find out what it really means. So maybe there's all kinds of easements, different definitions.
sure. and it
I
should be-
don't know.
Yeah. But, yeah. And I just wanted to come to really respond to your comment in that I would personally leave it in. Because it's something we've talked about. The idea is that, and maybe it can be clarified that if the driveway is made to be a private driveway, that the property owners will be required to maintain the road. Maybe that's the recommendation to flesh that out a little bit, but all the details of what road maintenance will be and how it will be defined, that'll be up to you later.
Okay.
I would make that a reason to pull it out.
okay,
Well, then,
Yeah, no, but
then I would prefer that there was a reference to something.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Road maintenance as specified in.
that's exactly what I was going to suggest, and a clarifying question for members of the public. Is that term too broad for you, or do you have a general understanding of what the expectation is by the terminology ongoing road maintenance?
I believe we have to.
Change the.
Yeah, it's maybe a note like based on consultations with, and their understanding, I don't know, something to your point, just to clarify that there's some level of agreement of what that actually means.
I don't want anyone to get in a bind later on in terms of what road maintenance is, that everyone has a good understanding of what it is that we're asking for in this process.
So that leaves, Robert, L, prohibit future lot splits and subdividing, and M, prohibit or limit ADUs on all parcels. And actually, NO, the monitoring requirements. Which would actually reduce it to 3. Because we keep the road maintenance recommendation. And then you're saying the gate issue is contingent on the right-of-way easement.
Yeah, I mean, pulling that out is fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you've raised concerns about maintaining a gate, things along those lines. So, yeah.
I'm out for that too. Okay.
Okay. We think of that as a commission then so option C with the following recommendations, minus the 3 that we've just discussed, plus the gate, so that's actually 4. But otherwise, as enumerated here in the minutes, and again, we'll just say these are conditions we've discussed to try to maintain as much of the open spaces character as it was intended when it was commissioned in service.
I'll still stand by my suggestion to keep M and L as subcategories of, to reduce traffic across the territory mesa. Consider these items. And just so they know that our effort was to reduce the impact across the territory mesa with regard to the vehicle traffic. And on that discussion with regard to public roadway versus private driveway, we too in our HOA have private roads with public access. The roads are not built to city standards. That's why they are adopted by the HOA, but the HOA obviously has to maintain them. Now, if this became a private roadway, I don't think it would be fair to have these owners have to maintain that roadway that's being accessed openly by the public. So, I think that you're saying everyone seems to be leaning, at least at the levels that you discussed, to keeping it a private driveway.
Yeah, I think we just discussed that initially because we understood that the commission would be wanting to limit the impacts on the basin. So one of the ideas was, well, let's talk about limiting vehicular traffic. Again, you can access by foot, you can access by bike, and property owners we're perfectly fine with that. Now, again, that could change when it gets to council. Council may go where Councilmember White was going, which is, maybe promoting more access up there makes more sense, but then they're gonna have to deal with trailheads and things along those lines, because where these people go, which I don't think we want to get bogged down here, but there's a lot of issues to making it a public roadway and putting that traffic on there, because we don't want to park on the side of the road, obviously.
Okay,
And one more comment to yours, even if a motion is made to, where you were going, Chair, with C, with L and M removed. And I understand your point, that you'd like to still make that known to council. That'll be made known to council, that the reason why we had the idea of the lot split restrictions and the subdividing restrictions in there was exactly what you said, try to limit the impacts. But we could pass along, the commission ultimately decided to remove those, but they wanted the council to still think about it as a possible way of reducing traffic up there. So all of this will be shared, I guess, is all I'm telling you.
I mean, I'm okay with sharing like our deliberations included that for sure. I'm skeptical of, I just don't want to set a precedent for expanding the scope of what we're supposed to be doing. That's all, yeah.
I think it's be very important, and the purpose of this recommendation, what the commission's authority is, what's the basis of their recommendations, how it goes back to the easement and all those kinds of things, in a clear way, so that the recommendations just don't come as recommendations, but there's a story about it before. The other thing, what reminded me of that is it Alexa? Yeah, who presented such a clear position of what the homeowners are saying. And I think that somehow should be included in our recommendation. So it's not like one side is against the other. It's both sides are trying to work towards an agreement, a good combination, a good.
So we could, so are we comfortable then saying, we're gonna recommend option C? We will annotate the conditions that were discussed here. There will be a note that some of the conditions were discussed under the spirit of trying to preserve the open space as best as possible, but that likely is outside the scope of our authority to craft a recommendation on them. But we wanted to highlight them for city council because we think it reflects the purpose and nature of the open space. So these are just sort of like advisory sort of comments or whatever. And we'll craft this, Robert, in some sort of like written thing that we can all see before it goes, or how does that work?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Joe, I'm gonna propose.
Yeah.
That's it. So, see, I think this captures where you're going. So I've removed L and M. I added a statement in there that the current conditions in the current easement will be maintained. And then those are all the conditions that seems the commission is comfortable with as revised during this meeting.
So the ones that Kevin removed, just to be clear, the gated, providing a great gate at boundary to prevent motorized vehicle property. That was
G, L, and M.
the future lot splits and subdividing of parcels.
Oh, wait, sorry, the last one about the monitoring, you mentioned that one, we're not comfortable with.
The ADU limit, and then O is requiring the parcel only to monitor future impacts to the adjacency.
So if that's accurate, if that's where the commission wants to go, someone could make a motion and second it, but that can be the motion, and I think that captures what the commission was suggesting.
Such a question. So like even on in the dark skies compliant, I mean, that gets taken care of in the development department of the development. I mean, even that doesn't necessarily have to be in ours because we know it's gonna get caught along the way,
Sure.
you know.
But it's again, it goes to, the commission was thinking about this. These are the things you're concerned about. Yes, it's gonna get captured through the zoning process. You're exactly, the planning process, you're exactly right. But I think it's fine to keep in there. It's not. Again, this is just for council to consider. This is showing the council what the commission was concerned about and what you'd like them to be thinking about as they move forward here.
I think the other one is H. I'm thinking we need that, the as-built survey.
I only kept it in there because again, it's in there, but I didn't have a problem with it. If you want to remove it, I can. It's probably duplicative, but do you want me to remove that one?
I think so, yeah. I think it's captured in other regulations. Members of the community present, any comments or thoughts on this motion as? Is there a motion to recommend?
I move to approve the statement there, option C, with the reduced number of conditions.
I second it.
All in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Yay.
Okay, our next order of business is Observatory Mesa Trail Planning. Robert, do you want to provide any kind of big contextualization for us to catch us up or?
Sure, yeah. And then SDR Mark, those up here to help protect this today as well. So just a brief update on the topic. It's a continued discussion on drafting of the greater Observatory Mesa Trail Plan that the open space section has been working on the community to develop and to review a draft concept for the purpose of implementing regulation and trail system up on the greater Observatory Mesa national area. It's been our intent that a final plan will include recommendations for restoration and define appropriate uses for the trail system. The city of Flagstaff will use this final plan to direct future management and trail implementations for that country. So our recommendation for this evening is that staff and partners will review the trail plan. We're going to briefly touch on the planning process and its changes over time. And then following this review, staff are committed to working with the commission on defining any potential recommendations outside of what we've already outlined in the commission, and then retooling the plan accordingly. So the goal for tonight is to share where we've been, briefly revisit what we've discussed as a commission at the March meeting, and then finally to capture any of the commission's recommendations for the trail plan, particularly on those topics where the commission has expressed concern. We are hoping to kind of wrap up this process of a discussion with the commission, perhaps by at the end of May or June, so we can revise the trail plan and then bring that final version back to the commission. Following tonight's meeting, the next steps for this will be for the open space section to review the commission's recommendation, determine what the recommendations will include in the revised draft, and then revise the trail draft and return to the open space commission to share the revised plan and share what is included in the final version and why. The final version will then be shared with the public during a final public meeting before taking the plan and commission's recommendation to city council for consideration and adoption. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Join us here or whatever you like. Want me to put it
I'll
right
right
here?
This is a new spot. Do you have the PowerPoint
Yep.
ready? Okay. Okay, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Commission, for taking the time to listen today and discuss the Greater Observatory Mesa Area Trail Planning efforts. We would like to kind of go through briefly kind of how we got to where we got to as far as the planning documents that we have. We'd also like to discuss what Southwest Decision Resources felt were the themes and direction you all were expressing at the last meeting, at the March meeting. We want to make sure that what you all had expressed was captured correctly. And so we have a variety of slides that kind of go through some themes of some of the ideas that you all were talking about and the sense that we got based on the notes that we took on some of the trends and the potential consensus that the commission had at the last meeting. So next slide, please, Robert. So we began, and the next slide will show this a little bit better, but we began in 2021 with a inventory of the Observatory Mesa Natural Area to understand what we had out on the landscape. That's often a good place to start when looking at a planning process. What do you have? Where would we like to go? And so kind of moved into 2022 and 2023, kind of evolving this trail plan and listening to the community based on public meetings to the best of our ability to find the balance that was expressed through the public comments that we had in 22 and 23. Last August was the most recent public meeting, and we have since revised that map, which we will see in a few slides here, based on the public feedback. And that's the map that we've been using for the past couple months to kind of talk about, where we could potentially go now with potential improvements based on the plan as it stands currently. Next slide, please, Robert. Okay, so this is our current conditions map. This is what was found on the ground and mapped during field assessments of the area. And so red lines are roads, green lines are trails. So this is kind of everything that we were able to see at the time. Remember, this is 2021. There are some changes. There are a few new things that would possibly be considered trails out there on the landscape, but this captures the majority of kind of the infrastructure, both approved and unauthorized, that we have out there. Next slide, please. Okay, so we took that plan and we created this first concept, this first draft concept. We did work with Lowell Observatory to understand what the potential was on the Section 17 property and what interest they had in providing public access for trails for folks using Section 17 and also being able to access the Observatory Mesa Natural Area. And so kind of used some of the ideas that were expressed during some of these initial planning meetings with land managers, with Lowell Observatory to develop this first map, right? This map was created without public feedback, but was created to the best of our ability, trying to understand what folks were interested in seeing or not seeing on Observatory Mesa. And so pay attention to the map as this slide changes. You can see in the bullets 24 miles of new trails, 6 miles of restoration, 13 miles of road restoration. Next slide, please, Robert. Sorry to shift it, but not a lot changed, basically, right? And so that last map from the last slide was taken to the public for the first community meeting. Trail reduction did not happen after that first round of community feedback. A lot of what we heard was pretty specific to specific areas. It was related to private property concerns that were nearby the boundaries of Detroit Mason Natural Area. And we heard a lot of desires expressed that weren't reflected in the plan from trail users. So some of the biggest changes between concept 1 and concept 2 were the addition of a couple of the trails that were unauthorized have been now proposed for adoptions in this plan. And so you can, it's tough to see, but there's actually 3 trails that exist on the landscape that are identified during the assessment that were constructed in an unauthorized manner that folks advocated strongly to include. So we did. And so I thought it was important to mention here that a lot of those numbers didn't change between concept 1 and concept 2. Miles of new trails, the restoration, road restoration, the access, the parking, only subtly. So, okay, next slide, please. And so this kind of shows you what was the main outcomes of that first public planning process. Adaptive bike trails were identified by stakeholder groups in the community as something that was really being advocated for. And so we tried to incorporate some of those into the trail plan on the Observatory Mason Natural Area. Trails for advanced skill sets. So this is what I was mentioning when I was mentioning folks wanted to adopt some of the unauthorized trails, and this was the reason for that. Alignments near private property move farther from boundaries. It's really hard to see. They're small realignments, and they did not affect the overall mileage of the plan in any significant way. And then buffer zones. So we learned from Arizona Game and Fish that they would prefer a 1/4 mile buffer for trails away from springs. So initially, when we did the original review, we had 1,000 feet, which we felt was good at the time until we learned from habitat specialists that a 1/4 mile, which is 1,320 feet, is more appropriate for species movement and access to the springs. So we did adjust alignments away from the springs per the data that we had to achieve that 1,320 feet. Next slide, please. All right. So that plan, that last map, concept 2, that was taken to the community for our second community meeting, which was last summer. We asked a variety of questions, both during that community meeting and during the online commenting period, to understand, were we really getting it right? We didn't make a lot of changes and really felt that, another opportunity to say we prefer a little bit more detail, trying to help us out in the balance of what we're trying to propose here was going to be useful to us. And we felt that we got a lot of really useful and valuable comments out of it. So we can see there's some trail reduction, proposed trail reduction, right? These are the dashed lines on the map. These are trails that are conceptual only. They do not exist on the landscape and they've not been flagged. They're just ideas for what a good trail system could be for the folks in the community that use this area for outdoor recreation. And so one of the big changes between concept 2 map and concept 3 map is that there's just some realities as far as some of the planning processes, specifically with Lowell Observatory. They're not quite ready to be incorporating themselves into this trail plan for more of a geographic perspective, a geographic planning effort. They have their own planning efforts that they're undergoing right now, and it's just not the right timing. Two of the underpasses along the south side of the mesa also will take a significant amount of time, so we need to be, considerate of how long that could take and not having a guarantee for success there. So we removed section 17 and Lowell properties from our thought process in this planning for the Great Observatory Mesa area. So we're now only considering Observatory Mesa Natural Area in the city of Flagstaff and the surrounding Forest Service land, section 7 and section 13. And so the miles of trail restoration, miles of road restoration are reduced, but that is because the section 17 alignments are no longer being considered. One new access point was identified by city staff. It's down on the southeast corner. It's off of Lower Coconino Street. Not referred to it in the last agenda item. Before the road goes up the hill, proposing a trail that kind of wraps around and connects to the Foots Tunnel Springs is another way to connect the community of Flagstaff with the Observatory Mesa Natural Area. And a lot of the, the commuter route remains the same, education zones remain the same. The alignments changed a little bit, so kind of the length of the commuter routes are slightly different. In both cases, just a little bit shorter, which is probably good. And yeah, next slide, please. Kind of major changes between 2 and 3. So I mentioned the kind of backing off a little bit from Lowell Observatory and also the underpasses underneath the railroad. Understanding that these things are just going to take time and we'll pick them back up when it's appropriate to do. We heard from the community that roadbeds are a valuable outdoor recreation experience for folks in town. And so we revisited that to make sure that, whether you're going up to Observatory Mesa to use just the roadbeds or a combination of roads and trails, that loops and opportunities were appropriate from what we heard from the community. The density of the trails was reduced from 24 miles to 18 miles. And again, we're only talking about the natural area and Forest Service lands. It's 25% reduction, but we did try to take out all the trails, not all the trails, but we try to take out trails with the consideration for wildlife habitat, proximity to springs and seeps, and the recognition that Observatory Mesa natural area is a valuable quiet area for folks in town, and making sure that we weren't creating a density that would reduce the value of that idea to folks that go up to use that space for that reason. We did make further adjustments away from residential areas that were kind of near the fringes, both on the east and north sides, based on comments that we heard during that comment period. And due to the reduction in the conceptual trails that will be potentially proposed, we had to readjust the adaptive mountain bike alignments to make it work, to create loops that actually allow them to get from point A to point B and from the proposed Tunnel Springs trailhead back to the Tunnel Springs trailhead on trails that they are physically able to use. Being that they are mobility devices, they're allowed on all these trails, but they're not necessarily physically able to use these trails, right? And so we had to make sure that we're providing an experience that wouldn't put them into a place that they would be forced to turn around and just go back the other way. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was a quick debrief of kind of how we got to the point that we got to. I'd like to pause for a moment here to see if any of the commissioners have any questions or comments. The next slides relate to the discussion that we had at the Good. Guys happy? Okay. All right. So my colleague and Jessica and I were here, and we had this conversation, and we asked each commissioner what your overall thoughts are. A few different topics that you've been discussing over the past couple months. Jessica took notes on the conversation and listened to each of the commissioners as you all spoke. And what we ended up doing is on the blue band on the top of the slide, this is let's consider these themes, right? Themes based on the conversations that you all had last month to allow us to kind of bucket some of the ideas and the comments that you all had, distill it down into a place where it's a readable PowerPoint slide for one, but also just looking to maybe make sure that we were hearing things the right way. So second round of community comments last summer, all revisions that were made to that map, that concept 3 map, were based off of the community feedback from the comment period that we had last summer. And so on the left side of the screen, you can see that, this is what we heard from the public in a very basic way, right? There's a lot more detail in our synthesis report from the public comment period, but this is the kind of the broad strokes of what we heard about trail designations in this example. And so, talking about directional single-use trails, we heard some desire for it. We've heard plenty of concerns about it as well. This was not a strong, easy, the public is all leaning in one direction, right? This was a pretty muddy gray area as far as the public comments were concerned, both the individual comments and the survey question that we asked specifically. What do you think about this? Yes, kind of, or no type of question. And then at last meeting, what we thought we heard was that the commission would prefer all the trails to be multi-use and bi-direction. So folks can use that trail in any manner that they want, in either direction that they want. And, did we capture this correctly? And is this something that you all would potentially make as a recommendation to the Open Space Commission? So trail designations is the first P. Robert, next slide. And we can reference these slides when we get through them. All right, so mountain biking in general. And so this really relates to the idea of trails for advanced users, right? And so on the map, trail 3.36 is the planning number that we used. Hot pockets is the term used amongst the community that uses that trail. So this would be a prime example of kind of thinking about, what the public said and what you all were talking about, right? And so we've got some desire for varied skill levels. We got concern for safety and fast biking on trails. We got concern about user conflict. These all came from the public during that comment period. Last month at this meeting, what we heard from you all is, multi-use trails are preferred with no mountain bike specific trails or features. We heard concern about the alignment hot pockets existing in that drainage that's aligned in currently. And we had a question about, is mountain biking considered a passive use per the open space management plan, right? The open space management plan refers to, approved and allowed passive uses for the properties on open space. And so there was a little bit of discussion around that. So that's what we heard. I mean, it's these bullets don't show clear, like we heard that the commission was thinking this, right? We heard some concerns for sure. We heard some discussion. Wanting to make sure that we captured this correctly to allow for discussion after this presentation. Next slide, please. All right, e-bikes. Another gray, muddy public comment period. We did not get a strong yes or a strong no for allowing e-bikes on the trails from the community last fall. We did hear from you all about conflicts with passive recreation, and we heard about concerns about challenging to enforce specific types of e-bikes. Remember, we were talking about class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes, the differences between the two, if some should be allowed and some shouldn't, if they should be on the trails or everywhere around it. There's a lot to that, right? And thinking about the way that, folks would ease of understanding of the laws and regulations determined by the open space department, and also, the ability to force that sort of stuff is what you guys were talking about last meeting is specific concerns of yours. Next, please. Okay, we also heard maintenance, enforcement, and funding. So we bucketed this all together with the recognition that, we heard concerns from the public regarding the same things. And you all expressed a desire for the maintenance plan or for the trail plan to discuss maintenance, enforcement, and didn't, to my recollection, discuss the need for funding in the plan, but the community did ask for that in the comment period. And so we have had some conversations around that internally between last meeting and this meeting, and the recognition that there needs to be language regarding maintenance and enforcement feels like an obvious oversight on the last draft, and we are planning on including that sort of language to be able to present to you once we are able to redo this draft and show it to you all based on your feedback and based on the public comments that we have. Okay, balancing preservation and recreation. So this is that big balance, the capital B balance that we've been talking about for the last couple of months. And so the public, feels strongly about their desires. They feel strongly about their concerns based on, that balance of what we're trying to achieve between, preserving the open space and the health of the habitat and the health of the natural landscape while providing public access in the form of trails. And so you all echo that sentiment. You echo the concern that balance needs to be achieved within that plan. Now, when reviewing the public comments, we have folks that are advocating for trails and more trails, and we have folks that are advocating for fewer trails or no trails, right? And so to achieve that balance, something that would be really useful from the commission for us is an idea of the how, right? Is it a number of miles of trails that you're looking for? Is it a specific area that you believe is too important from an environmental standpoint to have trails? Is there an idea on the types of experiences that the natural areas should be providing the community. More direction on that would be really helpful to us because that concept 3 map was the attempt at the balance based off of the public comments. Like that's after reviewing everything and making spreadsheets and criteria numbers and all the stuff. That's what we came up with, right? And so I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not even saying that it's good, but any further directions from you all would be beneficial for us to be able to review that map, to review, what we have in the plan to make those changes. Next slide. Robert, is that it? Yeah, okay. So here's the kind of the side-by-side comparison. On the left is that current conditions map, and on the right is this is that 3rd round, that concept 3 map that we have. Just to kind of show you what the proposal is as it stands now, again, in draft form, for what we would be proposing in this trail plan. Prior to any recommendations you all are able to make for consideration by the open space program. So this is just kind of a reference slide for you all to take a look at that. The final slide we have is next steps, and maybe we could look at it right now. Let's look at it right now. All right, so looking for, to give you all some time to be able to provide the recommendations to the open space program. Once you provide recommendations in written form, we will make the updates to the draft plan for the next meeting. Whatever the meeting is after that, it's the June meeting, the July meeting, we'll be able to update the draft plan for you all. And the idea would be is that we would be presenting this updated draft to you all as basically the first public source of, here's what we came up with, this is the balance that we attempted. Here it is. Beyond that, we'd be starting to organize that final community meeting where we're presenting this, kind of final draft of the plan prior to seeking an agenda item for city council. So if we're looking at utilizing the summer and getting this process into those final stages to be able to prepare for a city council presentation. Okay, can you go back to that now, just so it's there for everyone? So what we're thinking about now is, we want to understand from SDR's perspective, we want to understand if we captured your sentiments correctly in those what we heard slides. We want to make sure that that's being reflected in our thought process, right? We have notes on that meeting last month, and these notes are being considered, but we want to make sure that they're right? And are these themes that were presented on those what we heard slides, are those the themes that you all are looking to potentially make recommendations to the open space program and therefore city council on the plan as it stands prior to that final draft? So I will pause here. I'm available as long as you all want to answer questions and have discussions, but I'd like to see what you all are thinking. Please.
Only because I joined, the commission when this was in 2002, 2 years ago, when this was just getting off the ground. It was very overwhelming, frankly. So I've seen the progression. And I have to say that with all the discussions that we've had and reading all of the public comments along the way, I think that the map that you've ended up with, I think to me is spot on. Okay. I think it has balanced that conservation and recreation. I think it captured, in my opinion, our thoughts from last month's meeting, and we had a pretty good consensus among ourselves in our thoughts, and I see those reflected. I think the only thing that maybe was missing is about the budgeting. We did, just touch on the hopeful funding, maybe from BBB at some point, which is moving through, but that there might be funding for maintenance and, oversight up there. So, and I think what scales it back enough for that balance between recreation and conservation is it was the removal of the single directional trails and the focus on the more active downhill style mountain biking. Yes, mountain biking is an allowed use, but I kind of see mountain biking on a spectrum in the same way as a pedestrian. You've got your people that are walking with a dog or a child to a fitness walker and a hiker to a trail runner. And I see the same spectrum on a mountain bike. You can be using the trails just as your mode of transportation is a mountain bike, but then there's those that are really there for the the uphill climb, the downhill speed, the technicality, things like that. And I think removing that element of invitation for that kind of speed and technicality brought us back to a more broad recreational use. Because as we talked about last month, there are other places in the city and in the county here in Flagstaff that do cater to that style of mountain bike use. That was all I had.
Thank you very much.
You know, the thing that I read it and I didn't see really the comment about e-bike. What actually that we discussed that for a long time in the last meeting, but didn't really reflect in this report. So say what your recommendation, what actually that we propose to have it, because e-bike is really just several categories. And with a lot of noise, with the bigger engine and such, that make a huge difference in the trail.
I agree with what you said. I think we've come a long ways on the trails. And you can see it very clearly.
Yeah.
And the trails are now much more sensitive to the sensitive areas. And I like the non-directional trails, mainly because they are available in the Mount Elgin Dry Lake Hills area. And there's tons of trails up there, tons of challenging trails. And I see this area is similar to Buffalo Park in the long run, where it will be used, especially when we get better access to it, by all kinds of people. So that balance can only be reached, I think, by non-directional trails. And also the wider trails, what's the name for that? Adaptive trails.
Yeah.
That's good. I'll get the e-bikes in a minute, or maybe we'll all get to it in a minute. But as you know, trails, the hot pocket, that's illegal according to the easement, period. No question about it. And how was it developed? It was developed by some bikers on city property with the single focus is this is going to be a great challenge, and it is. And I acknowledge that. It's also a little bit more convenient than some of the challenging courses on Mount Elgin. But they have them on Mount Elgin. So to me, this is just going totally against what the easement about. They talk about crevices, they talk about oak, they talk about how important they are. And this is the main one on the south side. There are others on the east side and on the west side. I'm not too familiar with that on the north side. But this is the only real one on the east side. So that should be taken out. In the past, I've tried to reach a balance and saying, okay, a little further west, maybe you could build something like Bruce and I are familiar with in Maui, where they have a trail made with wooden embankments and other things as a challenging trail. That comes up against, I think, a little bit against passive recreation in some people's minds. I don't know. That digresses. My main point is we should not allow 3-point, look at it. There are several trees. And the one that I'm most upset about is the 3.27, 3.28. I believe that's the one. Oh, it's called 3.36 on the latest version. The problem with the 3.37 is that it takes you right to the low property. It's a beautiful ride, and it's a beautiful walk and view. And it's somehow, and you try to avoid having trails right next to the property line because it just becomes a nuisance. It's easy to cut that wire and cut many times. And And we haven't got the section 17 plans yet anyways.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe a trail will go up right into that area and make that 3.27 a viable trail at some point. So that one, I think, would be a valuable trail if we could get rid of or mitigate the problems with being ending at the low property line. But again, 3.26 and me is just a no-go. And not because I want to take an inconvenient, challenging run away from a few mountain bikers, because there aren't many that can handle that trail. And the ones are true athletes. But basically because it just, in my mind, it goes against the easement as I envisioned it from years ago when we were working.
First of all, thanks for the work you've done on this, and for incorporating all the different discussions we've had, because we've had a lot, and there's been a lot of public comment. And so I think it's a difficult task to try to distill that into graphical representation, so appreciate the work. But I've definitely gone back and forth on this. One of the things that still sticks out in my mind is lack of funding and enforcement. And one of the things that jumped out at me from an original article when this was being considered as a property was the unmanaged recreation that currently happened up there and a desire by many to try to manage it. And the spirit of the quote, I won't get it exactly right, was essentially, if we don't do something, people are just going to continue to do whatever they want up there. And so we should manage that. And to me, that was a tacit understanding that recreation played a really important role to a lot of people, and unmanaged recreation was probably worse than non-managed or managed recreation. And I see, and I'm not Hot Pockets as an example. I'm not endorsing it or not endorsing it. I definitely see his point 100%. Without funding, I fear that all these things that you're going to decommission are coming right back. I've seen it in every national park I worked in. Every decommissioned trail came back. Every shortcut, every switchback, every social trail, they all came back because they're the paths of least resistance, and they're where people want to go. I don't know how you can decommission Hot Pockets. They're going to be riding again. They'll start at night. They're going to build it again. We don't have the mechanism to enforce it. I almost would rather drive people to a limited contained area that had the features or whatever they wanted, unless we have a plan to be able to actually enforce stuff. I've been riding this deliberately on my gravel bike and mountain bike for the last couple of weekends, just to get a better understanding. I don't even think that your on the ground survey captured all the social trails.
No,
I was trying.
there's.
I was mapping, I was like, man, they're everywhere. I mean, they're literally everywhere. And so that's just a concern I have, because that kind of open terrain, it's not the East Coast where the terrain and the vegetation.
Right.
You go where you want, I mean, right? You just, hey, that looks fun and people do it and then it becomes a trail. So that's my concern. I definitely am leaning towards I like the balance that we've talked about. I think that's really important here. It's tough to measure the people that value the preservation aspect over it, because you can't like take a trail. I can tell you how many people go up there and ride or whatever, right? We could count every single person if we wanted to. I don't know how many people are sitting there just admiring the view shed and the fact that wildlife is up there, because they might not be going up there for that purpose. So that's difficult, but I'm on board with everything. I'm just concerned about the enforcement aspect. So we do all these things to what end? We spend all this money and time decommissioning things and realigning things. And then what happens a year later? If I rode up there, all of a sudden there's a whatever, I'm probably not me, but somebody else is being like, I'm gonna go shred that hill. I mean, so I wonder if the devil that we know might be better than the one that we don't in some ways. And that's one aspect of this that I haven't fully kind of come to terms with. I don't know the answer to it. I'm struggling with it, but I do agree. I like this version a lot better. And when you block out 17, when you looked at parcels, you're like, whoa, it's like every inch of that's a trail.
Yeah.
When you kind of look at it. And so when you sort of take it out, to your point though, and there's a lot of attractive nuisances, because we ride right through 17 and there's about 100 social trails that just veer off that into Wolf's property. you know, and we're not gonna decommission the Foots Mars Hill Trail. I mean, that's, you know, so there are attractive nuisances. That's a concept I think we have to deal with. Maybe we don't want to end right at their parcel, right? Because then what do you got? You got to ride back up or whatever, but to the extent we can eventually incorporate that into a more holistic plan, I think that's the direction we want to try to go, but understanding there's limitations because that's not part of this.
Yeah.
That's not part of this.
Yeah, and they're just not me.
And they're not in the same place. We can't make them, right? So we have to sort of do what we can do with what we have.
Just a question on the logistics of how this moves forward. So, you know, this like gets approved, start looking for grants and funding, things like that. Maybe, you know, we've got our funding for our open spaces, you know, on budget and all of that, and we are able to take on this. At what point would a plan like this be able to be amended? Like if Lowell is on board by the time all that gets put into place, you know, how much leeway is available after approving this as it goes through the process and is actually implemented?
I think that's a good idea. There does have to be some kind of leeway for us to be able to amend this plan even after it goes to city council, because as we just discussed in our last item, the state has conservation easement on this property, and so they have to approve this plan as well. So it's gonna have to go through the same process with the state, and they may come back and say like, hey, this alignment is just way too close for this art site. Even though we did a very good analysis and
Yeah.
500 feet, I think, from our site.
Yep, 500 feet.
But there will have to be likely an archaeologist on staff, and if we find some additional archaeological site, then there may have to be like a readjustment of these lines. And so that means we'd likely be in here again, presenting you like with those updates and how to retool that. And the same thing goes for Lowell Observatory. We're very excited about the opportunity to be able to partner with them again in the future. You'll remember like the initial draft of this, we were working with Lowell to maybe provide ADA accessible trail on their property because you could drive up to it and provide that. And that is something that we're very interested in pursuing still, because a lot of our property isn't a great fit for an ADA trail. So we do intend to pursue that partnership further, even though we'd like to move forward with the concept that for the city property.
Bruce hit it right on the head, and it's often a problem. We've got a Cadillac here, but we just can't maintain it without funding. And sure, we'll be able to, I think, eventually, especially when there's a plan and signs up and things like that, to get volunteer folks up there that would use it on a normal basis and take notes and things can be improved, and there is an example of that, and I really pushed for the Mars Footsale Trail that goes from Thorpe Park up to this area, and my argument with the trustee at the time, which he said, no, we can't do that, it brings all kinds of people in there, we won't be able to control it. And my point was, there are already campers, there's people staying over there. If you get a trail and it's maintained, people will tend to stand on that trail, and if they see something they don't like, they'll report it. And sure enough, we haven't had any camps up there since then. So that worked. So there are some things without money that could help, but this is too big a thing. I mean, just even doing the construction of some of these trails and the destruction of other, or removal of the others is going to cost money. The good thing is, if we settle on a good plan, even if we don't have the maintenance, at least we have the plan and we have the argument for getting it funded. Yeah. And then one last thing, just to clarify, Lowell has been always, well, at least the current administration has been always interested in partnering with you guys.
Yeah.
Their limitation is that the property at this point is limited by an act of Congress that said that it can only be used for Lowell purposes. And that was about to be taken care of by Congress when it was stopped. So for the near future, maybe the long future, that's the way it will be, bro. a while, and I don't know how the administration changed, with the retirements that are coming up next year. They may have a different approach, more positive, more negative, I don't know,
Right.
so we just can't count on it.
Can I comment on that? So, yeah, I think so. I wanted to recognize the point that you guys made about like the increase of maintenance. Obviously, increase the trail will increase the cost of maintenance. We do have some base budget funds allocated for that type of purpose that we can appropriate to the maintenance of the trails. And then we expect to have to go through the budgetary process the city has to request additional funding to maintain additional mileage as well. So that is an option that we can pursue in addition to, of course, the grant application that would help us implement trails. As far as enforcement is concerned, the plan does speak to like regulation signage, that sort of thing. We have an open space route program that we've used fairly successfully at Picture Canyon to educate visitors with volunteers being out on the trails and kind of communicating appropriate uses. We realize that we're not enforcers, we're educators in the open space section. But we do work closely with our police department for enforcement purposes. So if we have an enforcement issue, we do contact our PD officers and they will come out to our sites to help us enforce that. I do think another need of the open space section is to have an additional staff. The Parks and Recreation was fairly successful in getting because they funded most of their position, but a parks ranger position. Their job is to do education and communicate, work with PD and take on projects as well. It would be really great if we were able to go through the budgetary process and get that position similar to that will support open space. So that is part of like where we'd like to end up in the future. We're not there yet, but that could help support some of those concerns about funding, keeping on maintenance projects and enforcement as well.
Can we take a moment to acknowledge a member of the public, Mr. Silver, who'd like to make a comment?
Hi, Charlie Silver. I'd just like to make couple comments. This plan still feels recreation heavy to me, vis-a-vis preservation. It's just a general impression, okay? Also, I do have concerns also about maintenance, enforcement, needs. If these trails warrant enforcement, I know e-bikes may be off the table, I'm not quite sure, I can't quite tell, but I think enforcement is also an issue here. And I think there's something about emergency medical services too, considerations up here. Especially as this is billed as a kind of a destination area, which don't exactly like the idea of, but if that is the case, there are also potential impacts to neighborhoods surrounding these areas as well. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Westheimer. I wrote all over the back.
Okay.
So, I would like to compliment this commission. You're very thoughtful. You really do your homework, and that is awesome. Thank you for doing that. I have a whole list of things. One is for access for people who can't get up the mesa on the east side. A1 Mountain Road is there. And that could be an access point for people coming up in vehicles. And I would add another parking area over there. Most of the trails are on the east side, and that's where most of the people will go, and parking is inadequate at best. And it won't get better because you keep having to enlarge parking lots. The trails close right now to enlarge parking lot. Phi has an enlarged parking lot, and they fill up. So to think that the east side will be burdened with a lot of parking is unrealistic. But that A1 Mountain access might be a good option. Most people do drive to the mesa from experience because I've seen them. I see them going down our streets. Let's see. For the assisted trails, it would make sense to me if it were more looped. So that they didn't, because from what I can tell, the maps are really small when you print them out. It's an out and back for part of it.
but if it were, that might be better for those folks. A lot of this, and I see this throughout the city, these plans are developed in silos, and they don't think about working with other things that are going on. And so as someone who lives adjacent to this area and has for 34 years, but I've been going out there for 44 years, there are a lot of established users who go out there, and this public process has made no effort to talk to people. The 20+ neighborhoods who live around the Mesa, 20-some neighborhoods access the Mesa from where we live, and we can walk. Not everyone does. A lot of people drive to get there. It's legal, so whatever. A lot of them drive up to Lowell. So if Lowell comes out of the equation, I don't know where they're going to drive to get it, but that should be considered. But it's an established quiet area for these neighborhoods, and the plan itself talks about a 10-minute walk to an open space. Well, that's 20-some neighborhoods who have this. It's incredibly precious. And a lot of us take dogs up there. That hasn't come up much. Someone did mention bringing dogs. But someone coming by on a quick e-bike is not necessarily an experienced rider. It could be a problem. That would be really unfortunate. So why do I care so much? We need a quiet area for the west side of town. And we are so burdened. We deal with so much impact from having so much parkland. We have our park events, downtown. The high school traffic is crazy. West side, we call it the racetrack. We have different names for it, but we cannot get the police to deal with the noise and the fast driving. So Robert, when you talk about having police support, it's not there. We can't get crosswalks for people who park at the ball fields and walk across to the disc golf course or get to go up the Mesa Trail. It's a crazy mess on the west side. It's getting really loud and noisy, and the traffic is insane. We don't want more traffic. It's not that we don't want to share that area. You have 20-some neighborhoods we're already using it. So there's also a lot of construction coming away on the west side. So do I want more traffic? No, I really, really don't. Big events in Thornton Park for ball fields all summer long. But just some of the construction that's coming up on the west side, they're knocking down Flag Junior High, and I think Marshall's going to go. So that's on Benito. The Rio project, the third track through downtown, the St. Mary's. All of these construction projects are going to have a huge impact on us in terms of our access, noise, all of it. I mean, it's not going to be very pleasant for us. The Rio goes right through a neighborhood where I live, and then by the ball. So this is what I mean about silos. Really think about all the things that people are going to do and the timing of things. It's not that this can't happen, but it doesn't need to happen when we have to deal with all these things. And I totally agree with scaling it back. I'm so happy to see that it's been scaled back. I think some of the numbers may be, I don't know. Just because of all that, the West Side needs our quiet place. We need a place where we can go. And I'm going to ask yet again that the staff and the consultant had face-to-face conversations with these 20 neighborhoods, because no one knows about this. Really, people don't know. I've asked multiple times for 2 years. It's in the draft plan. It's in a July 1920 or 2022 memo that they were dealing with the neighborhoods. Not happening. When you have these big public events, the neighborhoods are diluted. Our comments are diluted, and we've been going there for 50 years. Some people. Joni was here last week. Now it's been going up there for more than 50 years, right? So if you have a bunch of people who just want more places to do their recreation, our voices aren't heard. We're the ones who are impacted. So I'm just going to finish with this one comment, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way, anyone. Because the land acknowledgement is for real, right? But aren't we just recreating that problem if we take a quiet area and turn it into a big recreation area where the long-term users have established uses, can share, If you overblow it, then we're gonna need an land acknowledgement for observatories. You know, I'm not making light of the land acknowledgement. I'm just pointing out that we're not learning from the need to do that. So that's mostly what I, thank you for your time and all your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you. We're getting close to coming. We've got some more items on the agenda. Is there other things we want to discuss about this? It looks like we've got a plan for next steps and going forward in terms of.
Robert? Robert, is it possible to make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. My name is Rick Moore, and good afternoon, commissioners. I want to thank you again for stepping up and donating your time and energy for managing and preserving Flagstaff's open spaces. I'm concerned that the trail plan has become inappropriately focused on bikes and their needs. As I've mentioned before, this is a trail plan for a natural area to be shared by everyone, including wildlife. However, we continually come back to bikes and their needs. Why is there virtually no discussion about the things that make Observatory Mesa a special place that needs to be managed as a natural area, such as wildlife opportunities for solitude, escape from the mechanized urban area surrounding it, and peace and quiet, maybe some family events? As you consider recommendations to the City Council, I ask that you keep in mind some of these other values and not focus on ways to accommodate one user group's needs. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comment.
So I think, to your question, Chair, we might need some detailed input on some of the topics that we went through, such as e-bikes, as far as making sure that we have identified the specific recommendation of the commission. So we can try to do that now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, maybe I can.
I have one question about e-bikes though, just for clarification. So when we talk about adaptive mountain biking trails, is an e-bike allowed generally? Is either legally or is that, can I say this is my adaptive way of mountain biking by using an e-bike on an adaptive trail?
Not to my knowledge. Adaptive bikes typically have 3 wheels, so they have these wider bases and they're officially, legally mobility devices. I'm not aware that any class of bikes is designated.
Question.
So like if somebody, we have reserved trails for adaptive mountain biking uses. Could somebody conceivably take an e-bike on that adaptive trail, claiming that the e-bike is the adaptation for whatever particular condition they have? Limited mobility, cardiovascular, whatever. And could they then take it on legally take it on the adaptive trail and say, well, this is how this is my adaptive way of riding.
So e-bikes would not be allowed on adaptive trails?
Not based on that definition, correct?
Yeah, but well.
But all
But-
adaptive cycles are are electric in some way.
Assisted in some way.
So what is not allowed on an adaptive trail? Period.
For the example that we're talking about in the plan, when you think about the adaptive trail alignments that were identified and being proposed, we're really talking about the width of the trail tread itself. Because adaptive cycles have, they have the 2 wheels in front or the 2 wheels in back, they're about 36 inches wide.
Yeah.
And so to allow a physical space for them to be on, we would need a trail wide enough to allow adaptive cycles.
Okay, so when I was saying adaptive trails, that's what I meant was the width.
Yeah.
And not preventing use of it. Part of it has to do with single tracks turning into just deep U's
Yeah.
and they're migrating. And the fact that lots of times 2 people might be walking along next to each other, that type of thing. So I was thinking in terms of width.
Yeah, and we could consider those potential benefits to a little bit. I mean, it's gonna appeal to a different type of user, it's gonna allow for different experiences. But when we're referring to the adaptive cycles in the plan, we're talking about, 36 to 40-inch width. The other trails being proposed are your standard 24-inch single track trails. Thank you.
I realize we're out of time, so I'll make this real quickly and we can decide about these discussions to the next meeting if you want to do that, or if you have a quick comment, want to give me a thumbs up, we can start revising the plan between now and our next. So it seems like we have consensus for multi-use trails, both being multi-direction. So it seemed like there was no issue there. Mountain biking, so I think we have a little bit of clarification that we need as far as like all trails should be multi-use, no mountain bike specific trails. We've captured that. We identified some concern about hot pocket, and so I think we at some point will need some input from the commission about what the recommendation for this plan is concerning trail 3.36. So it'd be good to either have a show of hands, like, or you can make a motion about whether or not we want to continue to provide that specific alignment in this plan.
I'd like to get commission's position on that. I mean, I'm ready to make a motion that the 3.26 be removed.
Yep, 3.26. Yep, and I gathered that, so.
I would support that.
Yeah, I'm not aligned on that. If we're looking for consensus, that means that we're all in agreement. I'm not aligned on that, but if the majority is, I think that requires some more, I'm just not satisfied that we have a plan to actually enforce it.
So I can move this for the next discussion.
3.36, yeah, I'm good with the multi-use and all the stuff. I'm just on this particular trail, I'm not quite there.
Yep, put that on the agenda for the next one. For e-bikes, I think that the options that we've discussed in the past would be to recommend no allowance of e-bikes on any natural surface trail but allow continued use on roads and foot trails. This would align with the previous council direction that would allow travel route through the natural area. This may require further work with Cupertino County on a portion of the Flagstaff Blue Trail, as they have an easement that runs through the property of the Flagstaff Blue Trail, and they do not identify e-bikes as motorized vehicles. Yeah. That would be an option. To recommend allowing e-bikes on all approved roads and trails, so for the entire concept. I think that was off the table, it seems, which is fine. To recommend allowing e-bikes on the roads, the Foots Trail, and potentially proposed trail 5.12, which would provide connectivity to the motorized Fort Valley Trail system. And this was an option that we discussed because of the importance of e-bikes, potentially allowing people to come into Flagstaff over the trail 5.12 as an alternative route rather than riding roads. So that was an option that I think we discussed in the past, but we didn't receive any clear guidance on. Or recommend not allowing e-bikes anywhere in Great Mesa. And this decision would require additional follow-up. So ordinance consideration and approval by city council, since e-bikes are not currently prohibited on the foot section nor on the roads in observatory. And then I think we did discuss something along the lines of recommend a consideration of a permit used for disabled or elderly. So we have an AD adapted mountain bikes, but you can get a one with ADA. But I think there was concern, like if you're over a certain age and you want to ride an e-bike, that maybe there should be an option for that. And I think there was an example that our city has an e-bike pass for people over 60 years old or who have a disability. That is something that we consider looking at for Flagstaff. So that is something that will need direction on the commission as far as like which one of those options is preferred.
I think Bruce has hit the, in my mind, at point a number of times. We can set some rules, but if we can't enforce and maintain them, then we have confusion and even maybe conflict. the only way we can do that, enforce rules and maintain it, is appropriate funding. So it all comes back, some of it comes back to, in my thinking of it. You mentioned the 5.21 connection. Where, I don't see that.
It's which, yeah, there. So if you look, up here in the northern section, here's Fort Valley. Oh, maybe the number is on there changed now. So here's the existing road coming from Fort Valley.
Okay,
4.4.
4.41. 4.41,
Yeah, I guess.
yeah, that makes sense.
And that comes down and connects with the trail system. So, if there was allowance for e-bikes, this could be something that is considered. That is a single track trail, so.
Yeah.
Like we said, it could create confusion if we're not gonna allow e-bikes on other single track trails. But with our review of the guiding documents, the commission, I think, was leaning towards the fact that our current guiding documents say no motorized vehicles.
So there's three things in my mind as far as e-bikes are concerned. And not necessarily this priority. It allows access for folks that might not be able to make it up the hill otherwise. There is a lot of people in the public that are afraid of e-bikes because of you don't have to be an athlete to go 20 miles an hour on an e-bike, but you also should be able to control that bike, and you might have a number of folks that just don't have that experience and the conflict with walkers. And the third one is that we've said over and over again, whatever we decide, how do we enforce it? Those are the three issues that I have in my mind with e-bike that I need to balance. If we can enforce it, then it gets down to just those two, conflict or access. How do we do both? How do we moderate one and do the other?
And then the last topic was the maintenance enforcement. So the direction that I've heard here is to include a paragraph to the plan that we have now that briefly talks about how we will address maintenance, work with PD for enforcement, and apply for funding for the implementation of the trail system. And how we will potentially look at asking for a budget increase through the city's process to help maintain the trail system. Adding so we can work on that revision now. And from what I heard from the commission today, we do have that balance of preservation and recreation that we're looking for in the current concept. So no revisions there. So with that, just to recap, we need further direction on 3.36 and e-bikes. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah,
I think so. Does that conclude the observed for Mesa? Anybody else need to talk about?
Unless Mark, do you have anything else?
No, I think it's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, next item on the agenda is recommended code changes to incorporate open spaces into the Better Business Bureau recreation tax allocation. And I think we're gonna get a presentation from staff on that.
We did still have a hand up on line.
Oh.
Mr. Miller, do you have further comments to make?
Do we have to make an announcement that we're gonna run past this or make a motion?
We can just go over.
Yeah, your end time is not. Yes, you can.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we've been discussing this for quite, well, at least 2 meetings, I think, that I can remember. What I'm presenting to you today is the exact code language that I'll be presenting to City Council tomorrow. Brief recap of what we're talking about is looking at the code changes that would be required in order to include open space as an approved section and program for funding from the BBB Parks and Recreation portion of the tax. So trying to be respectful of everyone's time, I'll try to go through this quickly. This affects 3 sections of the current city code: the Parks and Recreation Commission language, the Open Spaces Commission language, and the BBB code that identifies what Parks and Recreation quote unquote means. So while we're here, I'm also recommending a few cleanup things, and that's what you're seeing on this slide. The red is the recommended change. So this is really just administrative, to change from chairman to chairperson for the Parks and Recreation Commission, and to add the ability for reports to council to go as well with presentations, not just written reports. This is just under Parks and Recreation Commission. What's interesting about our commission languages is that every commission has different language. So this is not necessarily in the Open Spaces Commission, but it is in Parks and Recreation, and while I'm here, I wanted to update it. So that's what that is. Also for Parks and Recreation, this is where it gets good. So what we're recommending is to say that regard to the portion of the bed, board, and booze tax allocated under chapter 3-6, which is the code that talks about the tax, the commission shall make joint recommendations, and again, this is Parks and Rec Commission, will have the exact same language added to Open Spaces Commission, and you'll see that in a moment. Make joint recommendations along with the Open Spaces Commission to the council concerning the annual budgetary allocation of the Parks and Recreation portion of the tax, to include but not be limited to: number 1, adding into that definition open spaces, so that it would read developing Parks and Recreation facilities, open spaces, and programs as needed to benefit the community. And then going to number 3, developing, acquiring, and distributing material to promote parks, open spaces, and recreation. And then going down to letter E, which is a definition. Parks and Recreation means the development and management of public parks, open spaces, recreational facilities, and programs, and the Foots Trail. So these are the main changes that we would make both here and in the open space, that we would add this language to the Open Spaces Commission. And this, we believe, if council agrees, will allow us to spend the current allocation on open space as well as these other things. So before I move on, are there any questions?
Just a clarification, that's not adding any money. Just
Correct.
redistributing.
It's not changing the allocations. The 33% that comes to Parks and Recreation is still the 33% that comes to Parks and Recreation. It just adds to the definition of what we can spend it on. Okay. So here are some changes for Open Spaces Commission. Again, this is under the category of cleaning this up. There were,
we're not taking appointments from the Parks and Recreation Commission anymore. That went away when we reduced from, I believe, 9 or 10 commission members to 7. Now it's just the planning and zoning, so let's delete that. And then this other stuff in here was when the commission was first set up to allow for staggering terms. We don't need that anymore, so let's delete it out. So here is the language, I'm sorry, this is a little bit more cleanup. So the Open Spaces Commission code language currently references multiple plans, city plans by title that are outdated. And so this is trying to broaden that language so that we're not committed to those plans that the city's no longer using. So one of those recommendations is under letter D. Instead of referencing the Flagstaff Area Regional Land Use and Transportation Plan, let's just call it the current Flagstaff Regional Plan for an example of what I'm recommending. Okay. And then updating open space program to open space section, which is really kind of a budgetary designation for us. So here's where we would add all of the language that you saw in Parks and Recreation. This is the exact same. It's just adding it all to the Open Spaces Commission language. Any questions on that before I move on to the tax code changes? Looks like you're still reading, so I want to give you a moment to read it. Okay, are we good? Changing for the tax includes the definition under 3-6-1-1 definition, Parks and Recreation. You saw this in the Parks and Recreation Commission language as well. So just adding open spaces there. Under distribution of hospitality and district tax revenues, noting that 33% for Parks and Recreation conformance with Parks and Recreation Commission and Open Spaces Commission. And the same thing on financial control to refer to both commissions. So those are the recommended changes to be able to get open space and better funding. If the commission is okay with it, I would love to have either head nods or even a motion to approve the recommended changes.
I move to approve the revised proposed language as described here. I'm sorry, so.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Rebecca, for all your hard work on that.
We present to council tomorrow night, so listen.
At what time?
We're the third or fourth discussion item on the agenda. It's not a vote tomorrow, it's just discussion.
So about 4.
Probably after 4:30, 5 o'clock, maybe even. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any comments from anybody online about this agenda item or any from the commission as well, before we move on?
Just one brief one, this would go a long ways to addressing some of our concerns with maintenance.
And then maintenance and enforcement.
Great, thank you again, Rebecca. Reports and updates, Councilmember Harris.
This whole time, you're not going to attending the meeting. What's it all been?
I just wanted to remind people about the water rate meeting. There's another one that's coming up, and as many of us as possible should go so that you totally understand what's happening. I still think there's going to be lots of conversation from the community, and the more information you have about it, the better. And that the consultants are going to do a what if scenario. So if you have questions and you come and you say, well, what if you do this? What does that do? And so they'll be able to answer those questions for you. If you have some questions like beforehand, you can send those to council members or the mayor, and we'll definitely try and make sure that those get answered. But it's better if people can be there themselves, because you know better the questions that we do. Lots of other stuff that's happening. We're doing a budget retreat Thursday and Friday. Did I get that right? It's Thursday and Friday. Community, they're open meetings, and so people can come out and sit and listen to all the stuff and ask questions. We have public participation, and you're more than welcome to do that. One of the things that I'm trying to do is push commissioners to come to as many of those meetings, open meetings as possible. Because the more informed you are about what's happening across the city, I think the better you can do your job on this commission. I like the idea that we're thinking about, and is it Chair Applin? Is that how you?
Yes.
Okay. I like the idea that we're thinking about our scope of work, what we're actually responsible for in all of the commissions, and staying within those boundaries. I think it's important. So thank you for that. That's it for me. Unless you all have questions for me.
No, I just want to say thank you for being here. I so appreciate you getting to listen to our discussions. I think that being able to take that context back to your discussion,
Yeah.
council, is
Yeah.
so valuable.
It's really helpful.
Thank you for being
to have that. So, if you ever have things that you want me to report back on, just send me an email and let me know. And when I come to the commission meeting, I'll be able to talk about it.
Thank you. Commissioner Norton for the Planning and Zoning
Yeah,
Commission.
just real quick, we had one meeting that canceled, but we do meet this Wednesday. For those that were interested in that land availability and sustainability study and the code analysis project, it's coming to planning and zoning again on Wednesday with similar presentation that was given to council, where you're also going to hear a case on a preliminary plat for Juniper Point, which is along the JW Powell corridor. And I happen to notice that there's, some open space in that plat that's for future puts. So anyway, just be keeping an eye out on that. But I did wonder, since it about the JW Powell plan, back on April 9th, council got an update on where that plan, which would used to be an intention of a full specific plan, it's now kind of a bit watered down into maybe not a full specific plan. Anyway, there's been a road alignment. I did send an email to Robert and Michelle and David Peterson, who those two made the presentation. I was just wondering if it was possible for this commission to maybe get an update, because that road alignment got moved again, got bumped over. And it's because the whole JW Powell area is on our strategic plan as a high area of priority, and that Hoffman tank area and all of that. I was just wondering if, we can, get an update from someone about that. So, that was, if I have my notes. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Is that something the commission would like me to request for future agenda?
I mean, should that be anybody else?
Sure.
I think that's good.
I didn't get a reply back from my email to staff, so if you can get any sort of a, you know, that they would be interested in giving us a quick update, that'd be helpful. Okay.
Thank you. And finally, for reports, Robert or Sylvia for open space management report.
Yeah, I just want to mention that we tabled that birth thing. A lot of community come out for that and ask questions about open space. That was really great. We increased the size of our email list, so it's pretty great. And Sylvia, do you want to speak to the work that you partnered with the fire department? I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so the fire department partnered with AmeriCorps and to dig, I guess, a fire line up on Observatory Mesa off of Westridge Road, Logan Drive area. And they were like, come on up. And I was like, whoa, we can't just send everybody up there in their cars. And so we shuttled people up there. So there wouldn't be a bunch of traffic.
And that's in preparation for Burn Section 8, which is the unit that is up against the Westridge neighborhood.
Yep. And we have a full moon hike tomorrow night, starting at 6:15 into Railroad Springs Boulevard. And we're getting ready for more Arizona conservation work out at Picture Canyon, starting the end of June, restoring unauthorized trails. So if you're out there, you will see big piles of mulch and wood chips.
Awesome. Any questions or anything else? Great. Any informational items to and from commissioners and staff?
I have one thing. I attended the council meeting on Tuesday, and on item 10, actually talking about housing planning. And the consultant, I guess, that really just consult with society housing development for the city and other department. I attended regional planning before, and that's also specifically that saying it about where actually that we plan as community to have it the park and have it the open space and such. And I didn't see it that the discussion including park and rec or open space. Maybe the question has to be asked to the council in that way.
The consultant, the scope of the work was really to identify the parcels that are available. It really wasn't to talk about which ones were open space or which ones were for parks. What we wanted to know was, what do we have in the city, in the whole city? And I believe it was 180 some parcels. I might be wrong because I'm leaving it to my memory, and that's probably not a good thing. But so eventually we will get to that probably. I shouldn't say probably, we will get to that discussion, but right now we wanted to know, what do we have?
Okay.
And that's why we hired the consultants to tell us, what do we have?
Okay. I'll be happy to ask about that tomorrow in our presentation. And when it comes back to us, the planning zoning.
Because I recognize about the housing needs in this city, but also if we don't really plan it a way ahead, so it's like what's available, how many houses that we could have it, not counting in terms of open space or park rec in there. I think the regional planning is out of the window to me.
Well, just really quickly, I am on that steering committee on the staff side. So, I bring it up. You can rest assured of that. But it still does need to be, as Councilmember Harris said, the purview of this consultant is what land is available that's developed.
The inventory, basically. Inventory of land. Inventory of land. That's available for housing. But the thing that I want to have it in there also, other thing that really stated in the regional planning.
And let me just add that the information that they gave us includes public and private and city-owned land. So everybody needs to keep in mind that we can't tell people what to do with their land and who to sell it to and how to develop it to a certain extent.
Right.
So, and I just throw that out there to everybody. Is that, and housing is a priority, you know, and that doesn't mean that we're gonna take all of our parks and turn them into housing, because that's not what we're doing. But we are gonna try and develop housing in every way that we can, because the folks that are here need somewhere to live. I'm talking about the people that are not here, I'm talking about those folks that are already here. So.
And that's kind of what concerned me about if the GW House specific plan is not gonna be a specific plan anymore, because its intention was, you know, to guide the private development, you know, of public infrastructure, utilities and public facilities, which would be parks and open spaces. And so if we lose that influence, or those guiding documents that even private developers would need to work within, or at least, you know, be a part of the discussion,
The planning.
then, you know, we potentially lose some of that.
And any policies that we have in place, yes, they'll have to come in alignment with those, you know, that's a given. We've got zoning stuff or whatever we have that says you have to do this, this, and this. That's what we're gonna hold it to. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from informational items? Okay, future agenda items, next meeting, May 13th, which I think is a change in the cadence based on the Memorial Day holiday. So please take note of that, 4 to 6 p.m. still time wise. Observatory Mesa Trail Planning, which we've already knocked out several of these things. Prioritization for multi-year projects, bed, booze and board fund allocations, property preservation, and the Don Weaver Trail alignment proposal. Any other suggested future agenda items? That's a lot.
BBB will come off. I think we took care of that today.
Okay, great.
I can provide a quick update from the council feedback, and it'll be very quick. I can do that very soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
And some of these other items, just so you know, are to be determined for dates.
TBD.
Might
Okay.
not actually be for the next.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
And I don't know if it was new, but the green and the red down below, where you noted like it, where you're looking for recommendations, or that it was part of our strategic plan priority, that was really helpful. So whoever added those notations.
Oh, yeah, you bet. That's
Thank you.
just like a project that feels.
Yeah.
Everything in there for the commission.
Yeah, but it kind of prioritized like,
Flag on record.
yeah.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. We don't have to vote on adjourn, do we?
All right, it's great.
All right. If I had a gavel, I'd gavel us out.
No. If there's no presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
We strongly recommend you don't do this thing. They're close. Yeah. Well, yeah, once I start. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Deb, it's got. Well, it will sound.
The one that didn't get, they have at the, on state, just wait, because we'll get it. Open space ham, you wait, he's grabbing some now.
Open space hat.
Yeah, on Tuesday, remember there's the lunch something? Yeah, volunteer, yeah. He's getting ahead of you guys.
I've got more gas than you.
Yeah, we should.
Yes, please.
And it may, it's got me mad at that early stage. I asking questions. I have it, it's gonna try to, you know, like, saying, things like this chat. And some of these questions are probably further down the line. Than
Yeah.
Right now, that's very, but, but it would be nice to know at some point. That you have it, you want to have
Where is open space?
First, I think this,
Community.
so where it's property, so do you have like, like we're,
This one category under each.
like that we're now analyzed, so.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty important.
Several years, unless I was.
Nice job.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
It's.
Yeah. Yeah. The course